Having a good premise isn't enough to make a good story. You need to flesh out the idea, finish all the background work, and then edit it until every little inconsistency and flaw is ironed out. If you don't do the work, then even the best ideas won't carry you through. You won't capture the emotion and energy that the story requires to entertain an audience. Hello and welcome to my channel. Here I review new movies and television shows and try to release a new review every day from Monday to Friday. Today, I'm going over the film Hex. It's directed by Chris Johnston and Andy Malchiotti and written by Hans Rodionoff. It stars Kayla Adams, Matthew Holcomb, and Brian Roberts. It's a horror film that experiments with supernatural elements to create a nightmare situation. It has a good premise, but fails to execute it, and instead falls flat on its face. It struggles with different aspects of production, and the story itself is told in a confusing and drawn-out way that isn't exciting or interesting. The film follows a group of skydivers attempting an aerial formation that is said to be cursed. When one of them disappears during the dive, the others are left shaken and scared. One by one, they start to notice paranormal events that leave them fighting to survive. It's a simple plot, but the premise underneath is actually quite interesting, and could have made for a decent movie. The hook of the film is incredibly well done and sets up a fantastic mystery. From there, the film meanders along, doling out poorly thought out deaths, and trying to entice you with a mystery that gets less and less interesting with each one. The manner in which people die isn't scary at all, and at best gives off eerie vibes. The film ends up dragging on for far longer than it should have. The characters aren't fleshed out, and none of them ever manages to ingratiate themselves with the audience. Sarah is a generic protagonist dragged along at the whims of the story, and everyone else is just playing along. The antagonist doesn't have a personality until the final 10 minutes of the film, and he ends up being another boring, selfish prick that's evil for the sake of being evil. Without a character to attach yourself to, the film becomes about the emotions it can invoke in you, and it never manages to get any of them right. The way the story is told, the situation ends up feeling more confusing than scary, and there really isn't a mystery. It's clear who the antagonist is from the start of the film, and he doesn't do anything until the end. The only thing to keep you invested in the film is finding out what's going on. Production-wise, Hex really struggles to get off the ground. The acting is wooden, the camera work has an immense shake to it, and the soundtrack makes the film feel like a soap opera. It isn't a well put together film, and the end product looks pretty bad. The actors try their best to make their lines work, but none of it ever ends up connecting. The characters are all very similar in nature and serve the same purpose throughout the story. Each of them is an adrenaline junkie who likes to joke. Only Lisa has a different type of character, and she's barely on screen for more than 5 minutes. The writing and dialogue didn't give the cast much to work with, but in the end, no one stands out as having done a great job. The soundtrack is filled with original songs and actually manages to be slightly entertaining despite its flaws. The songs are a fun way to liven things up, and throughout the movie, there are moments where the soundtrack really shines. The problem is that they played it constantly. There is never a moment of silence, and the characters are always competing with the music to be heard. It's distracting and makes each conversation feel like a soap opera. As I said earlier, the camera work is shaky throughout the entire movie. It's pretty distracting. The visual effects are also on the lower quality side. The 2 explosions that happen in the movie look fake, and the murder scenes are poorly executed. They're never done in a scary or intense way, even when it's supposed to be. There are no jump scares, only one disfigured body, and no blood. This film lacks horror visual elements. In general, Hex just isn't much of a horror film. It starts with an interesting premise, but quickly devolves into boring, over-dramatic tropes that make it indistinguishable from any of the Final Destination movies. It doesn't have characters that you want to root for, or a story that horrifies you. It's just a long and boring cliche fest. 3 out of 10.